Because I do some advocacy for PTSD, would like to do some consulting for people who have memory and cognitive issues that come along with PTSD and other forms of mental illness. So I'm just kind of keeping my fingers in the licensure pie in case that opportunity arises. Um, I live in New Jersey. I have a couple of dogs that I train. I have a service dog that I've trained. Um, and I spend a lot of my time advocating for PTSD, both in the workplace, for just daily living, access to services, available resources. And out of that has come my writing two books. The first one is called Missing Pieces, and that's this one. It's hard to get it in with there, but this is my memoir that I published last September, and it is my story. From I will explain my story in a minute, but it's my story how I navigated having PTSD when there were very few services, and PTSD was not recognized as a diagnosis or a trauma issue that people who were not in the military could have. And this was in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So I was kind of out there self-advocating and finding my way back to myself. So this is my story. And then last week I sent my second book to the publisher. And this one is called, and I just saw the title yesterday, so I love it, Beyond Good Enough. A guide to everyday strategies to reclaim your life with PTSD. Um, the title came from my own experience in being in therapy for a very long time. And I had stopped, and then I went back because I had started to have a recurrence of symptoms. And the therapist said to me, "You're really good enough to function. You have all of the skills that you need." And I was not buying that. It was not good enough for me. I wanted to live my life with joy, without emotional pain, and find myself again. So good enough was just not acceptable. I wanted to be in a different place. So hopefully this book with the strategies that I've written about, that I have used and some still use, will help other people go beyond good enough.
The titles of the book, I know what it could mean to me, but what does it mean to you and what do you want it to mean to others?
I wanted to mean to others that there's no limit on your healing or your ability to find joy and get better, and to have someone, a professional, tell me, "You're fine, this is as good as it's going to get for you." I think that shuts a lot of people down and they stop looking. And sometimes people end up doing kind of negative things like self-medicating. You end up turning to addiction, because that makes you feel better. But it doesn't solve the problem. And I really wanted to solve the problem and be like just not satisfied with this. You're good enough. No, I'm not good enough. I don't want to be like Superwoman either, but I want to live a life where I'm not suffering every day. Um, and where I can find some peace and I can find some joy. And that was like my mission for many years, just to be happier, um, enjoy what's around me rather than being fearful. When you have PTSD, you become socially isolated, you are hypervigilant. I was very fearful of public places. Um, so that's kind of why good enough wasn't good enough for me. I needed to get out into the world, um, and just not go to work and come home. Um, so reclaiming your life is important.
Sounds
But
like you want to be safe.
yes, well, let me explain what happened to me too. In 1977, this was between my undergraduate school and graduate school. I was working as a receptionist in an employment office in New York City, a mobile oil corporation. And a woman came in one morning about 10 to 9, and she applied for a job. I interviewed her and took her application, well, gave her an application, and she started to leave. And she would not give me her application. And the office had a policy that I had to keep all the applications in for for our database. Um, so I asked her for it and she refused. And we had kind of a heated discussion about it. And she said, "Well, I'm not going to give it to you." And she started waving it in the air, and I just grabbed it from her. And she ran out the door. And I mean, normally, I mean, I'm not that kind of an assertive person, but I'm very small. You can't tell that, in this video. I'm 4'9", okay? She was not much bigger than I was. So I wasn't intimidated by her at all. I mean, if she was 6'5", I may not have done that, but I just snatched it from her, put it on my desk, continued on with my day. So about an hour later, one of my coworkers went and got some coffee and brought it back, and it was a big open concept office, and there were a lot of partitions that divided everybody's offices. So I was going to have to walk to the back of the office to get my coffee, and as I did, I took one step and another step, and the next thing I knew, I found myself on the floor under a large plant and had no clue where I was. Um, what had happened, and I'm just skipping a lot of details, but what happened was that woman that came in was actually a terrorist from the FALN. There had been a bomb scare all over, actually, bomb scares all over New York City that morning, but there was one for the mobile building in particular. They checked the lobby, but they didn't check the offices off the lobby. So she walked in with a black umbrella that had a bomb in it, and she hung it on a coat rack 5 feet from my desk. So had I not walked away, I would not be here tonight. Um, so that opens up a lot of issues in terms of safety and feeling safe, especially now with all of the threats of violence that happen in workplaces, school shootings. I worked in schools for a while, and that ended up being problematic for me because there were threats. So that's my difficulty with safety. I have very recently been able to get back into New York City if I go with someone. And I did ride the subway last January, which was incredibly difficult for me because I just don't trust the people around me. Um, and it's not something you can just like wish away. And that's the thing about PTSD is that it's a known fact that it changes, and trauma, PTSD actually changes your hippocampus and your amygdala, so that fear and flight and that sense of lack of safety and not having trust is part of you. It's not something that you can control. It's your body's reactions. You've been neurologically altered. So that's why you can't just get over it. Um, I'm happy to understand that now, but I mean, years ago, nobody knew that. So uh, people said to me initially, including my family, "Get over it. You're being dramatic." I had flashbacks. I actually had post-traumatic amnesia. I did not know who I was. And I still have memory problems, but I can cope with most of them. Um, I had flashbacks, nightmares, difficulty eating, difficulty learning, couldn't plan my day. And the list can go on and on about all of the symptoms and behaviors that I had. Didn't like to socialize. Um, so these are the things that I was confronted with, and I didn't like who I had become after the explosion. And to add insult to injury, I wasn't physically injured, but because I worked at Mobile, and because um, I had interviewed this woman or had interacted with her, I was a person of interest for 3 years until she was apprehended. And then I testified in a federal murder trial against her. So there was a lot of trauma with being uh, interviewed by the FBI and NYPD at a moment's notice whenever they felt like they needed me. So that's my trauma.
You're
Um,
sharing that story, and when I hear it, I hear someone that is going through something that you only see in movies, right? Essentially, it's like,
it's
my
pretty
goodness.
amazing. Yeah, pretty
Yeah, like
amazing.
this is my story. When you look back as you're retelling that story, were there people that just didn't show up for you in the way that you needed them to show up for you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, my family did not show up for me. Um, part of that is cultural. My family is Italian. My father was an Italian man. And he did not show emotion. And if anyone in your family had any illness, particularly if it was a mental illness or emotional difficulty, you did not talk about it because it would bring shame to your family. So it pretty much was, she's fine. She's not having any problems. She's fine. Um, but I wasn't. Um, I my professors at the university were wonderful. Went to Purdue, and they were wonderful in helping me navigate grad school. And I got through grad school and did really well and published research, and it was because of them. They really supported me and kept me going. But that was the main thing. And I ended up not telling anyone and not really even talking about it for many years because of guilt, because of stigma, huge stigma. I was afraid that I was going to be committed. My first job, in the 70s, that's what happened. And in the 80s, if you didn't fit in and there weren't services for you, um, you could just get hospitalized and not come out. Um, and my first job was in an institution, a 900-bed institution for people who were mentally ill. And at that time, the term was mentally retarded, which we don't use that term anymore. But uh, there were people there that should never have been there. And there were people there that never left. And then they became institutionalized because they lived there for so long and they kind of learned those behaviors because that's the culture um, that happened in those types of institutions 50 years ago. Um, so I was very worried that someone would find out and I would end up in a place like that. So I had to hide it. Um, and the only person that really knew was a therapist that I went to for many years, and probably, yeah, many, many, many years. I really didn't start talking about it till about a year and a half ago.
I'm old enough to remember that mental health meant that you were possessed.
Yeah.
Demons were inside you, holy water, blessings, or you had to be locked away because if you were to mention it, the shame and the guilt that people around you, it was something short of being stoned that burned at the stake. It was just horrific from what I used to read and remember. How did that situation then, as you're describing it, as you're looking around for support, how did that show up in your relationships going forward, whether your friendships, romantic or otherwise?
It was tough. I had a very hard time making friends. And I could, on the surface, on the surface, I was very outgoing and very friendly and gregarious. But it was pretty hard to get to know me because I had a lot of walls. Um, I had a lot of difficulty with romantic relationships. I ended up getting two divorces. I am now married for the third time, but this is totally different. Yay. We got married 5 years ago. Um, and he's definitely the right one for me. But the first two, um, I didn't pick them real well. There were things I didn't see because of my PTSD. And I also my ability to interpret emotions, other people's emotions, and feel emotions myself was impaired for a very, very long time. So I know when my first two marriages, or I look at a lot of relationships and I'd be like pros and cons. These are the facts. How I felt, and I maybe didn't feel anything, it didn't matter. It was like, all right, good job, check that box. Nice family, check that box. Kind of thing. And the emotional part didn't play a big part in it for me because I pretended to have emotions even though I did not feel them. As
In what
weird as that
ways did
sounds.
you, what ways were you pretending to have emotions?
I would think, I don't know that I ever felt l- love like I feel love for my current husband. I did not feel that way at all. I don't have the words to describe it, but it was not deep like this. Um, it's when a family member passed on, I knew I should be sad. I knew I should express sympathy, but I didn't feel anything. It was just like another day. Um, And I was like that for, I don't know, maybe 30 years. And then something happened. And I think it was a step in my own healing journey, but I started crying and having these outpouring emotions about everything. I could hear a song or something good could happen to someone, or I could be having a good day, and I would just start crying and I couldn't control it. And that went on for a while. And I went back to therapy, and the therapist told me that this was a positive thing. And I was like, well, it sure doesn't feel like a positive thing. Um, because you go from not crying for years and not feeling much to suddenly like everything was a big deal. So that was hard. So it's hard to get back in balance when you have PTSD because there's so many symptoms and they change. They change over time, they change in intensity. Um, and I didn't really understand that. I don't think anybody really understood that, but it kind of it shapes who you are, even though you don't want it to make you some. I don't want to be the product of my PTSD, um, but it has definitely shaped who I am.
I will tell you why I asked that question because the answer you gave is fantastic. Is I think sometimes we look at what we go through, especially if it's PTSD or some type of traumatic event, as a moment in time. It happened at this time because I was this person and maybe I contributed somehow, right? Many times you hear about the person who gets attacked, whether it's physically, sexually, or otherwise. They said that, well, maybe I did something to bring on that attack. Maybe I did something to put myself in a situation where there's this terrorist here. Or maybe I wasn't a good enough child and that's why my parents told me I was fat, ugly, and short and stupid. We try to rationalize it because if we can, say that this is my part in it, this is what I'm going to do going forward, at least we can move on. But what we forget sometimes is that the traumatic event will show up at work, it
Yep.
show up at the grocery store, it show up with our boyfriends, our girlfriends, our husbands, our wives, our family members. It's like the trauma becomes a person with that's faceless and we see it everywhere we go. And it becomes absolutely terrifying because you don't even want to go outside your house because you think as soon as you open that door, the trauma's going to flood into your life and you won't be able to escape it. Were there times in your life where you thought, man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through today, let alone the rest of the month?
Definitely, definitely. Um, but I also didn't want that to happen, as hard as that was. Um, there was a point in time too. I had a couple of different reactions to my trauma. For a while, it was um, just the whole experience. Everything reminded me of the explosion. Um, which was terrifying. You know, we were evacuated 4 times. So like going down staircases was hard. It was pouring that day, raining. Every time it rained, I would be faced with it. Every time I saw someone wearing sunglasses because the terrorist was wearing sunglasses. So there were a lot of things that triggered me, which kept me inside and kept me having difficulty making it through the day. After several years, I worked on that and got over those triggers. But um, someone asked me, it might have been my husband, said, why are you still having difficulty? And I realized that it was not that I was afraid or worried about a terrorist attack or violence when I walked out of the house. Now it's more of if there is a trigger, and sometimes there are, how am I going to deal with it? So I'm more concerned about my reactions to something unexpected than I am about something unexpected happening, if that makes sense. Like I don't think that I'm going to go into New York City and there's going to be a bombing wherever I am. I'm not worried about that, but I am worried. When we went into the city last January, I actually prepared myself for the trip because I was concerned that I might dissociate. Because we were walking through Manhattan and we took the subway, and I had not taken the subway since 1977. Um, and I was worried about how I would respond if the subway was crowded because I don't like that feeling of crowds coming in on me, especially in New York, because that's where it happened. Um, and sure enough, we got to the turnstile. And because I hadn't been in the subway in a million years, they don't use tokens anymore. You got to use your credit card. And the whole thing was different. And so I'm fumbling, trying to figure out how to do this. And there's people on all sides of me kind of pushing, and I froze. I could not move. But I kind of prepared myself. And so what I did was I just removed myself and went and stood away, kind of in the corner. Of course, my husband was already through the turnstile waiting for me. But I just moved myself, did some breathing, did some visualization, was able to get my thoughts back to, all right, this is what I need to do. Here's my credit card. I'm going to try this again. And I was successful the next time. But now it's a matter of preparing myself for things that might happen.
Take us through that part of it because there's so many people who have PTSD. What are some of the ways that you prepare yourself so you're ready for any emotions that may come up because of the traumatic event?
Sometimes you can't prepare yourself, but I've had PTSD for 49 years, so I know myself pretty well by now, and I know what triggers what might trigger me. And I think that's important. Some people don't really understand yet what triggers them. So that's the first thing. You really kind of have to know what is it, what unexpected thing or expected thing is going to or might give me difficulty. Um, and if you can identify those things, then you can come up with some strategies that you can use. And some of them are pretty simple. Like I don't do well with fireworks, and for years I have never done fireworks, never gone to a firework display. Well, my husband's family has a big fireworks display every year. And for the past couple of years, I have gone, but I always leave early and I hate it and I'm upset. And this year, I said beforehand, I'm not staying for the fireworks. Now, why didn't I say that before? But it nobody cared. I just was like, I'm not staying. It's it bothers me. And my husband was like, fine, yeah, go home. You don't have to stay for that. So I prepared. I knew it was a trigger. Instead of making myself do it because I wanted to be part of the family, I put myself first and said, no, this is not happening. And it was fine. It was no big deal. Other things, sometimes family situations are difficult. Um, Family gatherings. Um, it's okay to leave early. It's okay to have, and if you have to have a plan or an excuse, make one up in advance. But I'm have learned that excuses don't matter. If you don't want to be somewhere, you can just say, "Oh, I have to go." That's all you need to say. You don't have to explain yourself out of it.
I always tell people that when you're going through, when you're being triggered, you want to have a safe person, and that safe person
Yeah,
usually should come within, right? You want to be safe, but when you're being triggered, you may not even feel safe because you may perceive something that may not be reality. It just reminds you of something,
yeah.
therefore, the trigger. So you want that safe person you communicate, hey, I just don't feel comfortable right now. I am going to step away. If anyone asks, just tell them whatever it is that you want to tell me. Usually you have a code word, right? Orange, pink, or something like that. They can say that, hey, Christy was just feeling a little bit under the weather. She decided to step away. How important is community and that safe person when you're being triggered and you want to make sure that you're going to be okay and you have to try to soothe yourself?
That's real important. Um, my husband Bill he's just such a key person for me because he can be that person for me, and totally understands when I need to leave or if I don't want to do something. He just accepts it and doesn't. I don't have to rationalize. Um, it's just fine. He knows that if I can't do it or if it's too painful, or makes me uncomfortable, that I don't have to. So he's very good with that. Um, my family still sucks at it. Um, Seriously. Um, when I gave my book to my sister, she said, "Oh, I don't really have to read it because I was there." I was like, "No, you weren't. She's 10 years older than me. You weren't even living at home. I mean, you were married in a different state. You weren't there." "Oh, well, I talked to mom about it." Like, but you weren't there. You weren't there for me. You never called me. You never drove up. You never checked on me. Oh, well, you all moved to Bermuda, so I couldn't talk to. Well, we moved to Bermuda, but in 1969. This was 1977. So she changed the story. Um, so I was like, yeah, okay, we're still not accepting what happened, really. Um, but you know what? I've made peace with that. And I think that's the thing that's really hard is that accepting that some people who you really want to be anchors and be supportive of you just may not be capable of being that person for you. And for whatever reason, some of my family members just can't be that those people for me. And maybe it was just too painful for them. I don't know. If it's, I really don't know what their issues are, but I know they can't be who I want or need them to be. So I have found other people. My husband being one of them, and I have a couple of really close girlfriends, that we're just always there for each other. They're my people. So it's important to find somebody, and it may not be your family.
I think that is so key because we grow up, many of us, thinking that the family bond is the only bond,
Yes.
right? But then as you get older, you begin to realize, especially if you don't have the best relationship with your family growing up, you begin to want to search it, and you connect with like people. Sure, you may find some bumps on the road. There may be some people that come and go. They're here for a season, they're here for a reason. But then you begin to realize that no, I don't have to have only my family around me. I have a choice. How powerful is it for people, in your opinion, to realize that they do have a choice in the outcomes of their life?
Oh, that is the big thing. That is the most powerful thing. Um, you have a choice in everything. You have a choice in what therapies or how you choose to heal. You have a choice in who you want as friends. You have a choice for your job. You have a choice for pretty much everything. And for some things where you don't have a choice, like I didn't have a choice to be at the mobile building that day, um, but you do have a choice in how you respond to it. And that's key. So there's always a choice. You may not like what those choices are, but there are choices. And we all have that power to make those choices. And I think sometimes that's hard because we try to make choices to please other people and to make other people happy because a lot of people with PTSD are people pleasers. So you do things to make other people happy or like you or be in your community. Um, that's probably not the best way to make choices. You need to put yourself first, and that's not being selfish. That's self-care.
How thin is that line between selfish, self care, and self love?
How thin is that line?
Maybe not from our perspective, but let's say other people's perspective. I'll give you an example. Christy says, Train, I can't do this today. Oh, Christy, you're selfish from my perspective. But from your perspective, you're like, no, I'm taking care of myself. I'm showing myself self love. So when it comes to that perception of selfish from the outward looking in, right? Let's say how others perceive us. Is that a thin line, a thick line between selfish, self care, and self love, based on your opinion and your experiences?
Years ago, I would have said it's a thin line. Now I'm going to say it's a thicker line. And it's a thicker line because I don't care anymore about what other people think about my choices. Um, because if I don't take care of myself, I can't do anything else well as I want to. And that has to come first. And I don't consider that selfish because the person who knows me the best and the person that can take the best care of me is me.
I was a people pleaser in my 20s, and I thought I was happy. I thought I was doing okay until when things began to fall apart, the same people that I'd been backwards for wouldn't even look at me in the right direction. And then when my 30s hit and I realized what peace, contentment, and happiness is, I was like, I was so stupid to think that was the end all and the be all, because it's truly what they say, you don't know what you don't know until you see something better. And similar to you, when you mentioned your partner currently, when I showed myself the way that I wanted to be loved, then I was able to tell other people how I wanted to be loved. When I found peace, I was able to see how other people can impact my peace. As you continue to step forward, Christy, from your experiences and you want to help others, how much of yourself do you see in the people that you come in contact with?
Bit actually. Um, and I do some volunteer work for NAMI, which is the National Alliance for Mental Illness. And when I first started doing some volunteer work for them, um, I was in some of their peer support groups, which now I do facilitate. But um, I thought, How I didn't think I would get anything out of them. And I thought, I am so different from everyone else because my experience is like so unique, first of all. Um, and age wise, I'm probably one of the older people there. You know, I'm in my 70s. And I just thought, oh, I don't know. I was so wrong. And I don't know why I was so worried because I shared so much, I still do share so much in common with everyone, regardless of their age, regardless of their diagnosis, whether, you know, if it's depression, if it's anxiety, if it's bipolar, um, schizophrenia, we all share some behaviors and some commonalities, like not wanting to go out in public, not, difficulty relating to other people, intrusive thoughts, those that we all have them, even though our diagnoses are different and maybe it looks a little different for each one of us, but we all have see how that impacts our lives and are able to share about what helps us. And sometimes just sharing is what helps you. Just knowing that there's other people with the same struggles that you have and that they are functioning better or have some ideas about things that you can do to help yourself. It's an amazing community.
How were you able to get the courage to do that?
I just did it. I think after I published my book, I started talking about it a little bit more. I went on a couple of podcasts, and then I just decided that, maybe I need some support too. So I decided to go. I learned about NAMI and started going to the support groups, and now I'm actually a speaker for their In Our Own Voices program as well. So where you tell your story to various people in the community, so they understand a little bit more about mental illness and also understand that there's hope and that there are services and that people can be important parts of the community, even with a mental health diagnosis. How about that?
Ooh, I love that. Let me ask you one final question, Christy, before I let you go. If I can give you three wishes, what are three things you wish people knew about life after PTSD and the traumatic event, and why?
Well, I don't know that there's life after PTSD because PTSD is kind of a lifelong thing. It's life with PTSD. So there's one thing is I wish people would understand that it's not a one and done kind of thing. Your trauma's over, you've been to therapy, it's all buttoned up, we've sewed it up, and you're good to go. It doesn't work that way. Um, Certainly, you get better along the way. There's lots of great therapies. I mean, I had EMDR, and that was life changing for me. Um, but it doesn't ever stop. Um, and I know that I will still be using some strategies until I'm not around anymore. But so that's one thing is that PTSD does not really go away. And so when I talk about healing, I talk about healing of maybe some specific things, specific behaviors and problems that I had. Um, but I still have some issues, and I probably always will. And that's just the way it is. I look at it as, some people have diabetes, some people have cardiac issues, they've got high blood pressure. They have that affects their lives and they have to deal with it. So that's what my PTSD is. I just use my strategies and continue on. Another thing that's really important is that there's always hope. Um, I think that there were two things that have carried me through that still do. The first one was I wanted to live a life full of joy and free of emotional pain. And I say live a life because I don't want to say I want to be free of pain. I wanted to live a life free of this emotional pain that I was having, which was sometimes physical pain. But I also had the hope that I was going to find the things that would bring me that. So even though there was nothing right in front of me, this is what you can do. I was on always actively searching for whatever it was. And back in the 80s, there was massage, it was meditation, it was these things are common now, but what they weren't in the 80s and the 90s. So it was kind of freaky stuff back then. But I was going to do anything, try anything that wasn't harmful to me physically, um, to find that joy and to reclaim myself. Um, so that hope is always there, and people should never let go of it. Um, and my third thing um, is that people, there are lots of people walking around with trauma that you don't know about, that they don't tell you about. They're not going to tell you about it because it's too painful, perhaps, or because they are concerned about stigma or what your reaction might be. My little terrorist bombing story is not cocktail conversation or something you have over a cup of coffee. Um, so there's still people I know that have no idea, and they don't need to know. They don't need to know either. But I think it's important to recognize that there's people that are carrying things, carrying burdens that you don't know about. And so you should always try to give people grace, the benefit of the doubt. If they're acting a little bit differently or they seem a little despondent, you can be there for them. Um, and just being present for them is very helpful, but not